Welcome on board for this third stage in our amazing journey through the world of wines and wines of the world. Have you ever found yourself sitting in a nice restaurant with important guests you want to accommodate well and wondering what kind of wine you should order? This can be a quite uncomfortable situation, and the purpose of this lesson is to give you some hints which I hope will prove to be helpful. We live here in Thailand. In many Asian countries there is a different structure in the way dishes are served. In most Western countries, a menu is a sequence of different dishes: cold entree, warm entree, main course, entremet, second course, cheese, dessert was a usual menu several decades ago in wealthy families. Such menus can still be the case for big events. It is quite difficult to give an exhaustive overview. Several years ago, I got the exclusive opportunity to visit Moet et Chandon Mercier and the Dom Pérignon Museum. The most exclusive event on that day consisted in a gastronomic dinner in the Moet et Chandon cellar, with Moet et Chandon Brut Vintage Magnum served with all dishes. In other words, if you have a great wine, serve it and build your menu accordingly. Also, if you pay attention and avoid obvious big mistakes, you will see that most of wines will accompany most of foods without any major issue. Most foods and most wines are marvelous together. Sometimes a sommelier will recommend a very particular wine he has just discovered. Such an approach is great, but will be very confusing for students who are just discovering the amazing world of wines. Also, different countries have different cultures and like different tastes. Some like sweetness and will tell you that the wine should always be sweeter than the food. Some cultures will prefer acidity and freshness. It is therefore important to bear in mind that the best choice is the one you or your guests do like. If you avoid the big mistakes I'm going to elicit a bit later, most of the wines will make it. It's a matter of taste and budget or availability. In this course, I will try not to tell you what to drink with all possible dishes. This would be mission impossible, and as you can see, I'm not Tom Cruise. On the other hand, there are some simple rules to follow in order to avoid conflicts between foods and wines. What are the basic profiles to consider when we talk about food? First of all, we need to consider the 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami. Then we need to consider the weight of the food and the intensity of its flavor. Another point is important: your location. The location will determine the availability of certain wines. The location will also influence the type of food that will be served, the climate, and the type of wines. New World wines and Old World wines are significantly different, even when using the same grape varieties. This will be covered in week 8. Let's consider other characteristics like weight and flavor. First, the weight. Classic rules say red meat, red wine. There is always an explanation why people think like that. Meat is usually considered as a heavier food than fish. Meat requires therefore a full-bodied wine. Usually red wines are heavier wines. People will pair lamb with a Pauillac, a red Bordeaux. For what reason? It's quite straightforward. Lamb is a food with high fatty protein content. Red Bordeaux wines are quite tannic. Tannins react with proteins in your mouth. In the same way, we use proteins to clarify wines during the wine-making process. Tannins and proteins coagulate and precipitate in wine. In the same way, tannins remove fatty proteins from your mouth. This gives me the opportunity to explain another matching principle with the regional pairing. Pauillac is also famous for a lamb, breed Agneau de Pauillac Label Rouge. In traditional wine regions, mostly the Old World, the principle of regional pairing is just common sense. People grow wines that fit to their meals and vice versa. Mentioning Bordeaux wines, which are blended, mostly a combination of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot and Cabernet Franc, I must also refer to the recent American usage of blended noble grapes. They call it meritage. Give it a try. White meat like poultry, veal, pork or fish requires more delicate wines. The normal choice with fish will be a white wine, but a light, low-tannin red wine will also do the job. This would be my choice with poultry, veal and pork anyway. Match creamy with creamy. Creamy wines such as Chardonnay or Viognier, or both blended, match with cream-based sauces, pasta or poultry, or creamy cheese. Now the flavor. Delicately flavored wines like a Loire Muscadet complement shellfish and seafood. Flavor intensity, although similar to weight, is not the same thing. Flavor intensity, much full flavors together like Sauvignon Blanc and asparagus, mild flavors like Muscadet and oysters. A plate of steamed potatoes without a sauce is heavy in weight but light in flavor, as opposed to asparagus, which are lightweight but very flavorsome. The same goes for wines. The Sauvignon Blanc variety makes lightweight, intensely flavored wines, whilst Chardonnay makes heavy, full-bodied but lightly flavored wines. Quite often, it is not the main ingredient in a dish that provides a dominant flavor. In a creamy chicken curry, the sauce will be heavier and more intensely flavored than the chicken. In such a situation, you will pair the wine with the sauce. The flavor characteristics of some foods and wines are very similar, and consequently they make good combinations. Light fruit-based dessert can be matched with the special flavor of the Muscat variety. Spicy dishes can be matched with Gewürztraminer, a variety often described as spicy, or with Grüner Veltliner, Riesling, Viognier and Chenin Blanc. Spicy wines may have white or black pepper, cloves, ginger, allspice aromas and flavors, for example. Cream or butter sauces go well with wines that have been aged in new oak barrels and after malolactic fermentation. In fact, sauce and preparation are often the dominant features. Let's consider some basic rules. Food and wine matching remains one of the most challenging points for people who discover the amazing world of wines. In fact, there are only a few important points to be taken into consideration. We have just discussed about weight and flavor. We could basically consider two approaches. When food and wine do have the same characteristics, the flavor of the wine both complement and elevate the flavors of the food and vice versa, to reach a final enhanced taste which is richer than the two taken separately. Or when food and wine are in opposition, wine can act as a seasoning that adds missing characteristics to the food and vice versa. Sweetness of a Sauternes and salt in Roquefort cheese will pair admirably, although we have salt on one hand and sweetness on the other. Flavor plays in this perfect match a big role too. To achieve the best match, it's necessary to respect your taste buds and match the weight of the food with the weight of the wine, and to analyze the basic components in both the wine and the food. The idea is to try to balance wine and food so that neither your dish nor your wine overpowers the other. So respect the sequence. No sweet wines at the beginning of a meal. No dry champagne at the end. The idea is always beginning with the most acid wine, then increasing the weight of the wine and ending on the sweet final touch. First and most frequent big mistake, starting on the sweet note for the aperitif or the starter. Catastrophe. Your papillae are completely neutralized by the sugar and the alcohol. This is a rule that will always help you. Sparkling wine, white wine, red wine and dessert wine. Within each category, serve the light wine first, lights in body, lights in alcohol. Related to sequencing, some basic rules should be taken into consideration. A wine should never be lower in quality than the previous one. Keep a gradation, go from the lighter to the stronger. Serve younger vintage before more mature wines. Our taste buds are able to identify 5 basic tastes: acid, bitter, salty, sweet, and umami, as we saw earlier. In wines, we don't have any umami, a taste that you will find in smoked salmon, for instance. But you will have sweetness, acidity, and close to bitterness, the tannins. Tannins come from the grape berry skin, seeds, and stems. You don't find them in white wines except in oaked wines where tannin comes from the wood. We also need to explain what the body of a wine is. The more alcohol a wine contains, the more it feels fuller in our mouth. This is also due to the production of other alcohols like glycerol during fermentation. Acidity. When you eat an apple or an orange, you feel the acidity. Wine are made from fruits, which also contain acids, giving structure to a wine. Acid food will reduce the sensation of acidity in a wine. If the wine is too low in acidity, it'll come out unbalanced, flabby. No tannin with acid food. The perception of bitterness will increase with acid food. Acid foods require a wine high in acidity. Bitterness, it's not the best friend of wines. Try to compensate with acidity or sweetness. Salad can be bitter. A light sparkling wine would be good, like a Claret de Die or a Vouvray. Dark chocolate pairs well with a sweet Banyuls, which is a fortified wine. About fatty foods. Tannins precipitate proteins. Fatty foods will lower the perception of astringency in tannic wines. Tannic wines complement fatty foods. Rich foods, based upon coconut milk, will require acidic wines to cut the oiliness. Viognier would be a good choice with chicken massaman curry. A dry of sparkling wine pairs well with a green curry. A light Syrah would make it with a beef Panang Thai yellow curry. Italian cuisine uses olive oil and tomatoes a lot, which makes a tasty acid-fat combination. Italian red wines like Chianti or Valpolicella have noticeable acidity and complement the dishes perfectly. Saltiness. Salt has a strong effect on our wine sensations. It neutralizes the perception of acidity and bitterness in wine. Since salt is present in most dishes, wine always seems less acidic, less tannic with food than it does alone. A tannic wine will appear less tannic, fruiter with salt. Too salty will appear less salty. A tart wine will become fruiter and a sweet wine richer. A good example of pairing in a position as explained earlier. Sweet dishes will clash with tannin and dry wines. The perception of acidity will increase. Sweet foods require slightly sweeter wines. Umami. Jean-Antelme Brillat-Savarin refers to a savory taste in certain foods in his book Physiology of Taste, written in 1825. Umami, pleasant savory taste, is the name given by a Japanese scientist, Kikune Ikeda, in 1907. Ikeda discovered that this taste is imparted to foods by amino acids, especially the widely used food additive monosodium glutamate. For example, umami in salmon clashes with tannins. The first clash to avoid is the one that would occur between a food high in umami and a young red Bordeaux with strong tannins. Umami does not go well with off-dry wines either. The classic rule says white food, white wine. One of the reasons may be that many fishes are high in iodine. Iodine reacts with the tannins in red wine and makes both the fish and the wine taste awful. The coming part of the lesson is dealing with an issue we may have in Asia, particularly here in Thailand and the Mekong sub-region, but also in India and in China. Spicy food needs to be mitigated by sweetness and acidity. Here in Thailand, food is often very spicy. It can be sweet and rich at the same time, like a green curry. It's always full of flavor. The very first remark is about our ability to cope with chilies. If you can't eat spicy, there is no reason to worry about the wine. Enjoy a beer. When I first came to Thailand, I noticed people coming to the restaurant with their bottle of whiskey, most of the time a whiskey on the expensive side, and drinking it mixed with plain water and or soda. There must be a reason to that. What I figured out in my commerce was related to high alcohol content. When you read articles about pairing food and wine, they often say that alcohol will increase the hot sensation of spicy foods. This seems to be in contradiction with what people are used to do here in Thailand, a country serving one of the most tasteful, flavored but also most spicy cuisine in the world. Let's say the problem from a scientific point of view. What are chilies? They belong to the family of capsicum, like a bell pepper, for instance. Why are they so hot? Because of an alkaloid, more precisely a family of alkaloids. The main alkaloid name is capsaicin. When you eat too spicy, does it help to have a glass of water? Well, not really. And for one good reason, alkaloids are not water soluble. On the other hand, they are soluble in alcohol. In other words, alcohol would help rinsing your mouth from capsaicin. There is one grape variety that almost disappeared after the phylloxera plague and World War I, the Viognier. Dynamic vintners in Condrieu did not give up, and Condrieu is nowadays an exceptional white wine Côte du Rhône in France. Viognier produces fruity, full of flavor white wines, and in some cases full-bodied too. Viognier is now an internationally recognized grape variety that we can also find here in Thailand. In Europe, you could taste a late harvested Alsace Riesling or a Gewürztraminer Grand Cru. A curry could need the spicy side of a Gewürztraminer. Personally, I would like a Franken-Spätburgunder Weissherbst-Kabinett Albtrocken. It's also a matter of availability. The previously mentioned wine comes from Germany, not far from the city of Würzburg. The grape is a Pinot Noir, but processed like a rosé wine and off-dry. If you like barbecue, Mexican food, then a full-bodied red Zinfandel would be my recommendation. Depending upon the sweetness, choose a German Riesling, which is generally sweeter than in Alsace. Try a full-flavored Muscat. As we said earlier, sweetness requires sweetness. If you don't like white wines that much, try to find a low to medium tannin wine with some acidity in the Beaujolais style, Gamay Noir, or a Zinfandel. A Grenache Rosé deserves a try too. I would avoid tannic red wines with Thai food in general. Tannins do not well with the sugar that is often used. On the other hand, a light red Syrah would do very well with spicy grilled Isan food. I read that chilies will emphasize the bitterness of tannic wines. Again, like for high alcohol, I consider the problem from a more scientific point of view. Tannins precipitate alkaloids. I wanted to verify it without spoiling any wine. I sometimes have a cup of tea in the morning. The other day I asked my wife to provide me with some chilies. I put the cooled down tea bag into my mouth. Bad taste would be an understatement. Then I chewed a red chili. Well, I can eat very spicy, don't try it. And tasted the tea bag again. Guess what? The bitter tannic bad taste was gone, together with the hot sensation in my mouth. Please don't taste it by yourself. You are not used to eat hot chilies. Red Syrah would be perfect with very spicy Suaronghai Crying Tiger beef salad, very spicy Lap Mu pork salad, or Nia Nam Tok beef salad, and so on. Though make sure beforehand that the food itself is not bitter. This can be the case with Lap Mu. Spicy food will not completely jeopardize your wine. Your taste buds are capable of discerning 5 tastes about wines we can only consider sweet and sour or acid. Bitterness can be linked with the astringency due to strong tannins. All aromas and flavors we mentioned about grapes or wines are identified by your nose, not your tongue. If you want to play on the safe side, choose a white wine with some residual sugar and a good acidity. Its light sweetness will help lessen the heat of the chili, and its firm acidity will cut through the richness of the often used coconut milk. If you are lucky enough to stay here in Thailand, remember the regional pairing explained earlier. There are 8 or 9 wineries in Thailand which will provide you with wines that pair very well to the local cuisine. Some classic pairings: cake goes well with a white mellow wine, foie gras as said with Sauterne or Barsac, fresh fruit salad with a sparkling rosé or pink, fruits de mer, seafood with muscadet, goat's cheese with a Sancerre or a Puy fumé, green asparagus with Viognier, grilled roasted pork with Syrah Malbec, oysters with champagne, Parma ham and melon with an Italian Pinot Grigio, raclette, which is cheese with a Fondant du Valais, which is wine from Switzerland, roasted lamb, as said earlier, with Pauillac, red Bordeaux, Roquefort with Sauterne or a port, strawberries and cream with an off-dry sparkling wine. Le meilleur vin n'est pas nécessairement le plus cher, mais celui qu'on partage. The best wine is not necessarily the most expensive one, but it's the one we share. Georges Brassens, a French singer, songwriter and poet, born in 1921, and he passed away on the 29th of October 1981.